Hey DIY friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Stephanie from Home with the Daniels. So today I'm going to show you how to build a cabinet without a table saw. That's right, you don't need a table saw to build a cabinet. I've built my garage cabinet, my fireplace nook cabinet, as well as my bathroom vanity cabinet without using a table saw. Just a few tools and some determination can help you create a custom, beautiful cabinet. You can find all of the details, all the tools I use linked below in the description, as well as a blog post that will have all that information as well linked below too. Let's dive into how to build this cabinet without a table saw. Hey DIY friends, ready to transform your living space without breaking the bank? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Stephanie from Home with the Daniels. I'm here to empower you to turn your Pinterest dreams into reality one project at a time. Join me for budget-friendly tips and tutorials. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to tap the notification bell and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get started. Now before you start buying any materials, you first need to decide on your measurements for your cabinet and sketch them out. You can do this the old-fashioned way with paper and pencil, or use an app like SketchUp for a more detailed design. SketchUp has been my favorite app to use to see what my design actually will look like in person. And there's definitely a learning curve with using SketchUp, so if you would like me to do a video of the basics on how I use SketchUp to do my projects, just comment below and I will do a video for you all soon. Once you have your measurements, it's time to get all of your materials. For my cabinet frame, I usually use 3/4 inch plywood. The type of plywood I choose depends on whether or not I'm planning to paint or stain the cabinet. For a smoother finish, I usually go for maple or oak sanded plywood. But for my garage cabinet, I actually use pine plywood because it's more affordable, and because it's a garage, I didn't care about it looking perfectly smooth. Here are all the tools you will need to build this cabinet, and as I mentioned earlier, they're all linked below in the description. Before I actually start cutting the plywood, I always apply a piece of painter's tape along the cut line. This helps prevent the plywood from splintering, giving you a cleaner edge. Using the Kreg blade is also important for a smooth cut to avoid splintering. So make sure you choose one that's designed for plywood or fine cut or cross cuts if that's what you're doing. After applying the tape, I mark where I'll be cutting. Well, it's not necessary to do so, but I like to use a T-square to draw a guideline. This helped me hold the saw steady and ensure that I'm cutting exactly where I need to. Time to actually start building. I cut my wood using a circular saw paired with a rib cut circular saw guide. This guide is what allows me to skip using the table saw and is so much more affordable than a table saw. It makes it easy to get a straight, clean cut. This guide track paired with your circular saw is a game changer for DIYers working with limited tools, space, or budget, making it a must-have for any project. Here's a tip when cutting your pieces. Cut all the ones that have the same measurements at the same time before adjusting your saw guide to another measurement. This ensures that all of your pieces are exactly the same size. Having a shop vac nearby is super handy to clean up all the wood dust as you go. I don't always keep my workspace clean, so this is a lot of progress for me. And also, don't forget to wear your protective gear like safety glasses and a dust mask. I forget this often, but it's so important to do. For the cabinet frame, you'll need to cut 3 pieces of plywood, 2 for the sides and 1 for the bottom. I use the same process to cut all 3 pieces, making sure to follow my measurements and guidelines for precision. Here's a 3D sketch to show you exactly how these 3 pieces will come together in the cabinet design. I'm a visual person, so seeing this 3D sketch is super helpful to me, so hopefully it is to you as well. Now, if you're building a cabinet like this without using a countertop of a different material, you want to make sure to cut 4 pieces. You can use this process to build a dresser, a standalone cabinet, or even nightstands. The steps are the same, you're just adding an additional piece of plywood to the top. Before assembling the cabinet, make sure to sand the edges as well as the top and bottom of each piece. This removes any roughness from the cut and ensures the pieces fit together smoothly when it's time to assemble it. I usually start with 120 grit, then end with 220. And you can use sandpaper, but I really love these sanding sponges. They're so much easier to handle. Eventually, I pulled out my orbital sander to sand the top and the bottom so I could go faster. Sanding is probably my least favorite thing to do, but it must be done. To assemble the cabinet frame, I used a pocket hole jig. Pocket holes create a strong hidden joints that are really easy to do, even for beginners. If you're new to pocket holes, I recommend practicing a few times on scrap of wood to get the hang of it. The most important thing when using a pocket hole jig is to set your pocket hole drill bit to the correct depth, based on the thickness of your wood. Since I'm using a 3/4 inch plywood, I'm setting the drill bit to 3/4 inch. I've made this mistake before and not set it correctly, and I've ruined my piece of wood, so just be aware of that. If you'd like a detailed step-by-step guide on how to use a pocket hole jig, I'll be putting together dedicated videos soon. I'll make sure to link it in the description, so stay tuned for that. If you're wondering which piece to add the pocket holes to when building a cabinet, I choose to make the pocket holes on the bottom outside piece of the cabinet. This way they won't be visible from the sides, keeping the cabinet looking clean and professional. But if you're building cabinets for a built-in nook where the sides won't be visible, then you can definitely do the pocket holes on the sides. That's what I did for my cabinets that I built next to my fireplace. Here's a 3D clip showing how the cabinet box will look with the pocket holes placed on the bottom. This visual will help you better understand the assembly process and placement of the pocket holes. Keeping everything square is important when building cabinets. So I use my right angle clamps to hold the pieces in place while I drill. These tools are like having an extra set of hands. Once my right angle clamps were in place, I grabbed the pocket hole screws and started drilling them into the pocket holes. I also added wood glue before attaching the pieces. And whether or not you decide to use wood glue is up to you. Pocket holes alone are strong enough to hold the pieces together, but the glue does add extra strength if you'd like. And of course, this wouldn't be a DIY project if I wasn't struggling to keep all the right angle clamps from falling. After assembling the 3 sides, it was time to add the back top support. I used a piece of scrap wood that I also put 2 pocket holes on each side. To make sure the box was perfectly squared, I used my laser measure to double check the measurements for the top and the bottom of the cabinet box. They should match. I used clamps to keep the back support piece in place while I screwed it in. As you can see, I also used pocket holes to attach the back support to the cabinet box. Here's a clip of me attaching the 2 pieces with pocket hole screws for my fireplace nook cabinet. I built it in a very similar way to my bathroom cabinet. Now it's time to build the cabinet base. The base provides support for the cabinet box and keeps it from sitting directly on the floor. I designed the base slightly smaller than the cabinet box to create a toe kick. Now moving on to building the front frame of the cabinet. When working with plywood, you notice that it has a rough edge. You can either cover that up with edge bending or building a front frame using 1x2 to hide it. I chose to build a front frame using 1x2 with pocket holes and wood glue. To make sure that the frame was perfectly squared, I used a corner clamp to hold everything at a 90-degree angle. Here's a sped up clip of me assembling the frame on the floor using the corner clamp. Unless you have a large workbench, honestly the easiest way to do this is right on the floor. Before attaching the middle piece on the frame, I double check to make sure that it fits, because we all know you can measure twice and still mess up in the measurements. I may or may not be speaking from experience. And this is me doing my weird happy dance because it fit perfectly. And now adding the middle piece to the front frame. And once that was done, I went ahead and painted it black because that's the color I was doing in my cabinets. Here's a close-up of what the front of the frame looks like. And another close-up of the back of the frame with the pocket holes. To make the cabinet shelf adjustable, I added shelf pin holes using the Kreg shelf pin jig. You don't have to use this tool, but it makes life so much easier, and I'm all for things that makes life easier. Once I decided what height I wanted my shelf to be, I grabbed a scrap piece of wood and cut it to that length. Then I clamped it to the cabinet so that the shelf pin jig has something to sit on. I also clamped the shelf pin jig to the cabinet to make sure it doesn't move around once I drill through it. You could use a measuring tape to measure the height on each side, but I just find this way easier and hassle-free. This makes sure that I'm drilling a hole at the same height on all 4 sides of the shelf. This jig simplifies the process by making sure all the holes are evenly spaced and perfectly aligned, and it also prevents you from drilling too deep. Here's a close-up of what the shelf pin looks like. If you're making a cabinet for a built-in nook, now is the time to put your cabinet box in the nook on top of the base. Here's a clip of us doing the same thing for our bathroom vanity, where we put the cabinet box on top of a base. Before attaching the top of your cabinet, be sure to double check to make sure the shelf fits. Here's a close-up of the cabinet with the shelf. You can definitely attach a back piece to the cabinet, but I didn't think it was necessary since it was going to go against the wall. But if it bothers you seeing the wall when you open your cabinet, you definitely put it on a back piece. The doors of the cabinet, I used 3/4 inch plywood. I believe this is oak plywood, although it doesn't really matter. You just want to get a good quality one. As you can see, the surface is really smooth. Here is another piece of plywood that I have. This is 1/2 inch. This is not, it's not the best quality. If you want something with a smooth surface for painting, you will have to fill all that up and smooth it out. Whereas this one is already all smooth out for you, so there's no extra work. But this piece is more expensive than a piece that would look like that. And in order to have the edges looking nice, I went ahead and used an edge banding. This is basically a piece of, I think it's veneer, but there's glue on the other side. So once you heat it up, that glue melts and sticks to it. And this is what it ends up looking like. This, the edge of the plywood ends up looking like this instead of like that we can have a smooth edge. They do sell them in different variety of wood types. So if you're actually leaving this natural, you can get an oak edge banding. I believe this is just pine edge banding, but since I'm painting it, it didn't really matter to me. I didn't record myself actually putting this on for the cabinet doors, but I have recorded multiple times me doing this on another piece of plywood. So I would share that video, or I might just put it in the next clip so you all can just see really quick how I did it. But I do have a video that just shows how I do edge bending, which I will link below. After edge bending, I painted the cabinet doors black and now just waiting for it to dry. Because I wanted a custom countertop for this cabinet to fit perfectly in the nook, I started making a template using wood rulers and hot glue gun. Because no walls in your house will ever be 100% square, this method is one of the best ways to ensure a perfect fit. I've made the mistake of trusting my walls and thinking they were 100% square, and it disappointed me every single time. To create the countertop, I glued together pieces of red oak solid wood, then used the template that I made with the rulers to cut it to size. Here's how we assemble the pieces of oak to make the countertop. We use wood glue and pocket holes to securely join the boards together. We also use lots of clamps. I probably use all the clamps I own. And we let that dry overnight. Once the countertop was dry, here's a clip of how I used the template that I made to trace it onto the countertop to cut it. I used my circular saw and track saw guide in order to get a straight cut. And of course, I forgot to record a YouTube clip of me installing the front frame. So here's a zoomed in clip I recorded for Instagram. So all I did was apply wood glue and clamped it in place. Don't forget to wipe up any excess wood glue drips before it dries, because it's so much more difficult to remove after. While the countertop was drying, we moved on to installing the hinges on the cabinet doors. I used a Kreg hinge jig to install the conceal hinges. This jig makes it easy to drill the cup holes in the correct location without even thinking about it. It makes sure the hinges are properly aligned and securely installed on the cabinet doors. Here's how to use it. Adjust the hinge jig to the appropriate offset of your hinge. Decide where you want to install your hinge, then clamp the hinge jig securely to the door. Attach the special drill bit which is included to your drill. Then turn the drill guide on the jig to lock it in place and start drilling. It's that easy. Once you drill all the way through, turn the drill guide to unlock it. Then use a 1/16 drill bit to drill pilot holes into the hinge screw guides. Once that's done, unclamp the base and repeat this process for the other hinge. Before installing the hinge, be sure to clean the area. I use my shop vac to do this. Now time to actually install the hinge on the door. All you do is pop it in and screw it in, and because you use a hinge jig, it's at the perfect location. Plus, what I love about it is that it's adjustable, which allows you to account for the correct hinge offset for the perfect fit. Now time to install the doors on the cabinet. This was super easy to do. I used scrap pieces of wood to raise the cabinet door to the desired height. This helped me hold the cabinet door in place while I drilled it in. Once the hinges were aligned with the cabinet frame, I drilled pilot holes first, then secured the hinges to the frame with screws. If you're using a drill instead of a screwdriver like I am, just make sure to go very slowly so you don't strip the screw, because these screws are pretty small. After installing it, I double checked to make sure it was leveled. And the hinges that I got, you can actually adjust it a bit up and down if you need to. And the next couple of clips show me repeating the same steps for the other cabinet door. And the final step is installing the countertop. I actually still haven't decided on the stain for it yet, so for now we went ahead and set it on top of the cabinet until I can make up my mind. To cover up the toe kick, I used 3.5-inch baseboards, which are the perfect width to cover 2x4s. I painted them the same color as the cabinet and secured them with brad nails. And that's it. Now you have a custom cabinet with doors. And honestly, the longest part of this project was waiting for the paint to dry. And the best part about this, you can customize a cabinet and build it to fit your space exactly how you want it. My next project will definitely be organizing this cabinet. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful and that it inspired you to tackle your own DIY project. I'll be sharing the details of this corner next to my fireplace soon. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out my DIY concrete fireplace makeover video. I will make sure to link that below.